Hello lads, ladies, gents, ladetts, whoever, whatever, welcome back to another video. I'm sure most of us are aware of the Bay Harbor Butcher Dexter, an extremely successful TV show from the mid-2000s. Dexter still to this day holds a place within pop culture, and thanks to its more recent spin-offs that have just come out, I thought it'd be a good time to revisit the game that it had, since, like a lot of properties of its time, it was subject to the worst fate of anything by having a tie-in game. Not only that, it was a mobile game.
Oh, the humanity!
Now, it did eventually get ported to PC, which is how I did play it for this video. Developed by Icarus Studios, who also made the sequel that sadly, or maybe fortunately, never came to PC, Dexter the Game was met with lukewarm reception from fans. The plot itself is actually perfectly fine, since it follows the first season of the show, and the story itself is relatively well done. However, it does suffer from some issues, and this is because you are adapting a TV show into a video game. You are trying to condense everything down while making it more understandable in a video game format, but this hurts the pacing and the general structure of the game. So, in the interest of not spoiling the show too much, I'm going to avoid attempting to explain story related things and pretty much just talk about the actual gameplay itself, because I think the show is 100% worth watching in your own time. Immediately, you'll notice that Dexter the Game is pretty far from a good looker, and considering its support from a mobile game, I can understand that, but some of the character designs definitely leave a lot to be desired. It's not all bad on the presentation front, as they actually managed to have some of the main cast return to voice their respective characters. However, that's only in some cases. For the most part, a lot of the characters are voiced by other people, and it's pretty damn obvious. Especially Deb. She really suffers from not being played by Jennifer Carpenter. It's not to say they did a bad job, but it's clearly a different person. The soundtrack itself is also lifted straight from the show, so I can't really show it here. So I do recommend checking it out in your own time, just because I don't really want to get a copyright strike. They also did an alright job in representing a lot of the main areas that you would expect to see from the show. From Dexter's apartment, to Rita's apartment, the station, the lab, everything's there that you would expect, and it's pretty fun to explore them. However, it's worth noting there are some pretty interesting quirks when it comes to the game's visuals. If you do talk to somebody, you'll notice that they now have a 2D background behind them that seems to have a fisheye lens that makes everything seem really weird. Furthermore, if you're paying attention to the skybox, it's literally a box. It's very obvious where the edges are. It feels like a bit of an oversight that's happened during the game's production. Again, as a mobile game, it's understandable, but it is one of those things that we take for granted these days. Getting into the actual gameplay, this is where the game will definitely be hit or miss for pretty much anybody, as a lot of the game's control is pretty straightforward, though it's all basically prompts. There's no real direct control as you might expect. It's pretty much nothing but quick time events, and although it's functional, it's definitely not the most engaging system in the world. The rest of the gameplay loop revolves around a lot of mini-games, and even though they are pretty straightforward, they can get a little bit boring and stale after you've done them about 10 times. And even though I did enjoy my time trying to do the blood matching minigame, it's way more difficult than it has any right to be. Effectively, you go through the motions as Dexter. A crime will happen, Dexter will need to show up and investigate, gather evidence, or at least talk to people who have gathered evidence, and then go to the lab and figure things out. And you get to do that, which is pretty cool. But it does get a little bit stale and repetitive considering you're going to be doing this for every case. It's not engaging enough to drive home a full game experience. Though, given the limitations of what they had to work with and the hardware that was available at the time, it is understandable. The game would have done better to have a little bit more variety for sure. In saying this, if you are a fan of Dexter, there might be enough here for you. But if you're more of a casual viewer of Dexter, the odds are you're probably not going to get anything out of this. As was typical of games at the time, they tried to have loading screen messages, but thanks to modern PCs, you do get through these pretty damn quick. And it ends up leading to a Harry jump scare pretty much every loading screen, which was pretty funny when I played this with friends. Furthermore, as a side note, if you want another good laugh, just look at some of these game over screens, because they are ridiculous. We were not prepared for how funny these actually look. Getting back on track, one of the biggest problems the game has is its pacing issues that I mentioned earlier, and this comes down to the actual gameplay loop itself, because you have huge chunks of just talking to people and then huge chunks of just doing minigames. And if you're good at the minigames, well, they're not going to last particularly long, thus the title, minigames. It really hurts the overall flow, because nothing really feels like I'm actually investigating something as much as I'm just hitting a checklist. And even though, yes, it does do a better job than some, it's far from the best detective game I've ever played in my life. Now, the most important question you're probably asking as a fan of Dexter is, do they recreate some of the most iconic scenes from the show? And surprisingly they do, although it does come off a little more comedic than originally intended, and I think that's thanks to the hindsight of already seeing the impact of what it would have carried in the show versus the game. As mentioned, this is a pretty faithful, if not somewhat flawed retelling of the story of Dexter, at least for the chunk of the series that it's covering. I can't speak for the sequel game as, well, it never really came to PC, and I'm not going through the effort of trying to find out how to get that thing running. However, for what it is, it's pretty solid. I know I was seemingly negative about the game, but it's surprisingly bad in the best way possible. It's one of those so bad it's good experiences, and it's very charming for it. I actually do recommend playing it, especially with friends where you can just goof around and have a bit of a laugh at it. If you're a hardcore fan, there's enough here to justify it. If you're a casual fan, maybe not, unless you're really looking for a laugh. So, did Dexter the Game butcher its source material? And yes, I am very sorry for that one. Well, the answer is yes and no. Although the controls aren't particularly great and the gameplay loop isn't something that I would call inspired, the story and plot, like the show, are intriguing enough to kind of justify playing it. It has that B-grade horror movie feel to it, and ultimately I do recommend it. It's classified as abandonware, so I'm going to have a link for you to download it in the description below, so if you want to check it out, go for it. So with that, lads, ladies, gents, ladetts, whoever, whatever, it brings us to the end of another video. Thank you so much for watching my video on the Dexter tie-in game. I do apologise for missing a couple of weeks because I was quite sick with a viral infection, and even now I'm still a little under the weather, though I actually don't feel that bad, but every couple of seconds I start coughing, so this took way longer to do the voiceover than I was hoping to. I also want to take the time to say thank you so much for watching for this year, and wish you all a Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, whatever it is you want to celebrate. I hope you have a wonderful end to the year, and I hope to see you in the new year. If you enjoyed the video, please consider hitting that like button. If you want to go that extra step, you can hit the subscribe button, and if you want to go that extra mile, you can support me on Ko-fi, Patreon, or YouTube memberships like these lovely people here. And with that, I'll see you guys in the next one. Stay safe out there. Bye.